Welcome to another episode of the Twinspires Racing Roundtable. Nick Tammaro here, deputizing and hosting two of the guys that I like to talk about racing with in this forum for sure and beyond. James Scully and Vance Hanson, both joining me to go over a really loaded weekend of racing. We had some stakes at the top end of it, including the Haskell Invitational, where we saw journalism get the job done, first start back off of a busy Triple Crown season where he ran in all three legs, including winning the Preakness Stakes. We also had the Haskell undercard. We'll touch on a couple of the performances from there, as well as a big win in the Coaching Club American Oaks and anything else that caught our eyes from another busy summer weekend. Without further ado, let's get right into it and start with journalism, who again was victorious in Saturday's Haskell Invitational. Not only was that an impressive performance in and of itself, James, where do you think it sets up journalism to go next? Obviously, we're always focused on what can happen moving forward, and there's still a lot out there for the talented son of Curlin.
Well, yes, definitely. And Michael McCarthy has options. He can either come back, he can ship back from California for the Travers on August 23rd, I believe, or aim for the Pacific Classic a week later at Del Mar, where journalism is currently based. I'll tell you, I came away impressed by his effort on Saturday, just to start off with. Didn't get away from the gate well. Didn't appear to be really traveling all that smoothly, I thought, in the early stages, and then had to swing widest of all off the far turn and had plenty of work to do. And he just gallantly went and got the top two. I thought Gosker and Goal Oriented, really, they're still relatively lightly raced types. I thought ran really well, but journalism was better than them. And just have to give him a lot of credit, guys. I mean, this is a horse he ran in March, April, twice in May, June, July, and now he's going to come back and run in August. Don't see a lot of horses carry that schedule, be like top class like journalism is. But in my eyes, he's going to go for the Travers. I do think, by running in all these races, they didn't have to go to the Haskell after competing in all three legs of the Triple Crown. They didn't have to run it in the Preakness after running second in the Kentucky Derby. And I know the horse has something to do with it, but I just think that Eclipse Thoroughbred and the other owners of journalism are sportsmen, and they realize what's in front of them. If they're going to have any chance to knock off Sovereignty for the 3-year-old Eclipse title, they need to go get him right now in the Travers, or try to go get him right now in the Travers. So that, to me, is where I think journalism will go next if he bounces back well from this race. Haven't seen any races so far take too much out of him, and I'm optimistic. McCarthy will be able to choose. He'll be doing so well. It'll be up to the horse, and they'll go for the Travers to try to beat Sovereignty before they get to the Breeders' Cup Classic this fall.
Vance, your thoughts on journalism, who's now the only 3-time Grade 1 dirt winner in this crop?
Yeah, I'll disagree with James here. I don't think going to the if the goal is to be the 3-year-old champion, you're down 2 races to none against Sovereignty so far. If you go to the Travers and you lose again, you're down 3-0, and it's virtually impossible, no matter what the result of the Breeders' Cup Classic might be. I think there's probably more to lose as far as championship is concerned if you go to the Travers with this horse. Instead, I would stay home and run in the Pacific Classic. Stay in your home backyard, get over 1.25 miles there at Del Mar, which is the whole site of the Breeders' Cup Classic this year. And if you win the Pacific Classic, you at least have a victory against older males to your credit. Now, granted, it might not be a very stellar field of older males, but you still will have that in your cap going into the Breeders' Cup Classic. And then once you get to the Classic, then you get to face Sovereignty again on your home turf compared to Sovereignty's home turf is Saratoga. So bottom line for me is if the 3-year-old championship is a goal, I would stay home and run in the Pacific Classic, try and beat older horses, and then meet Sovereignty on your home turf.
Yeah, I actually agree with that completely, Vance. I would do the same thing. And I'm a guy who loves to see horses run in ambitious spots. But, this is a horse where I'm almost willing to say at this point, okay, don't do it to him again. Don't make him travel across country again. And you're going to play Sovereignty's game again if you're going up there. And let me ask both of you a question. what would you fear more right now, running against Nisos at 1.25 miles or Sovereignty at 1.25 miles? Because I got to tell you, I fear running against Sovereignty a heck of a lot more right now at 1.25 miles than Nisos.
I'll answer that, and I'm going to say that they're not going to fear running against any horse out
And they
there.
shouldn't.
They think they have
Exactly.
the
They
best
should not.
3-year-old. Now, listen, there is one caveat. I mean, Sovereignty has to win the Jim Dandy on Saturday, so I'm like talking from the perspective that he will win that race, because I'm looking at it where they both, after this coming Saturday, if Sovereignty wins like I expect, they're going to have one race left until the Breeders' Cup Classic. You know, if let's just say he goes to the Travers and wins that race, and then Sovereignty, for whatever reason, doesn't show up in the Breeders' Cup Classic, he's still going to have a chance, I think, in there with a big effort to edge him, having beat him in the Travers. I just think that it's a much taller task. And if we're talking about them being scared of something, then yeah. But I'm saying they're looking at it where they can win either race. And if that's the case, then I would think that the Travers, because I still do think that, listen, if Baeza or anybody else in that short Jim Dandy field beats Sovereignty on Saturday, then yeah, I mean, let's stay at home, make Sovereignty come face you. But if he wins that Jim Dandy, is going into the Travers, he's not going to have a lot to race for potentially in the Breeders' Cup Classic if he was to get upset on Travers Day. And the horse that has the best chance to beat him, in my eyes, would be Journalism.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say about that is that Sovereignty could win the Jim Dandy and the Travers, and Journalism beats him in the Breeders' Cup Classic, and the voters will still give the award to Journalism.
Right, exactly. I'm like just saying, listen, all the things that both you and Vance said about the Pacific Classic are right. I mean, running out of his own stall is something that Michael McCarthy talked about after the Belmont Stakes. But, he handles his shipping just fine. And it's all going to be how he bounces back out of it. But if he bounces out of it like he has out of previous races, then I do think the Travers will be an option. And it'll all come down to like how important it is and whether or not they think they can beat him, going after this championship award.
Now, one thing I'll ask you, Vance, this was not a performance where we were certainly awed by the ease with which it was earned. He worked hard. This is a horse who is very workmanlike. He's a grinder. Does it give you any concern that he was a little slow into stride and awfully hard ridden to get it done, given how strong and how lengthy already his campaign has been?
Yeah, Umberto Rispoli did say after the race that he was not taking hold of the track very well to begin with, but going back to some of James's analysis earlier of the race, I think by the time he hit the backstretch, to my eyes at least, he seemed to be grabbing hold of the track much better. But at that point, looked to be traveling very smoothly. And you're absolutely right. He is a bit of a grinder. It really takes him a long time to kick in. And sometimes it's not even until inside the eighth pole that he clearly shows that he's going to come on and get there in time. And, he was cutting back from 1 3/16 to 1 1/8 here. Some people argue that actually 1 1/8 is his better distance than 1 1/4. And that remains to be seen. But I don't think this has much to do with the length of his campaign so far. I'm glad he's showing a bit more to be more of a bit of a throwback so far, maintaining his form as much as he has through the campaign that he's had.
There's probably zero chance he runs next year as a 4-year-old. I mean, I don't know, but boy, it would be fun to see him, because I think, being by Curlin, and he could keep getting better too. I think as a 4-year-old, Journalism could. But this might be it come this fall.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this ship likely had something to do with an incentive in a stallion contract to get a grade 1 in the back half of the year, and they obviously checked that box already. And look, these connections with this horse can basically do whatever they want from here on out, right? We've gotten such a treat in actually seeing a horse run as frequently as he has run, to run 4 times in 12 weeks from the Derby to the Haskell at this stage of racing. It just seems unheard of. So it's great to have had that happen already I think it was actually 4 times in 11 weeks. So, journalism, a horse that they're playing with house money now as far as the fans go. And it was great to see Monmouth have such a big day, right? They had a big day in large part because he's a popular horse. This is obviously a very popular card, and it was an undercard, actually, that had a number of really strong performances. And I think, Vance, you wanted to touch on one of those as we go along, recapping some of last week's action.
Yeah, Redistricting won the United Nations for Chad Brown, who, like a lot of grass races on the East Coast, he basically owns it, has won it a lot of times over the last decade or so. And Redistricting in the fall of last year, it was coming off a bit of a layoff and ran 2 really nice races in the Knickerbocker at Aqueduct and then the Seabiscuit at Del Mar. And he looked really poised to have a very good campaign this year. And it didn't start out that well at all. Ran very modest races at fairgrounds and then in the Turf Classic and on Kentucky Derby Day. But this horse has really regrouped himself at Monmouth this summer. He won the Monmouth Stakes wire to wire, going 1 1/8 miles. And this was a bit of a tougher field for sure, and stretching out to 1 3/8 miles for the first time. But as you saw right there, he handled the assignment quite well. So now that he's demonstrated himself beyond 1 1/8 miles and up to 1 3/8 miles, I think he would have handled an extra furlong just fine. So Redistricting has a lot of options for the fall. I mean, he could stretch out to 1.5 miles. He could cut back, I assume, to 1 1/8 miles, those kind of races. So I don't know what Chad Brown's plans for this horse are, but he's finally starting to show the promise that he displayed last fall, and he could be a potential player in the domestic turf division, at least so far in the second half of the year. I don't think he's going to necessarily be competitive with some of the better European horses that come over for the Breeders' Cup, but he won't be embarrassing himself by any stretch after the form that we've seen on the Jersey Shore from him this summer.
So only one U.S.-based runner has won the Breeders' Cup Turf going back the last, I think it's 10 years, and that was Bricks and Mortar, of course, for the exact same connections as Redistricting. James, what do you think of Redistricting going long? I'll admit, guys, I didn't like this horse going long. I didn't like the way he looked down the stretch at Fairgrounds or Churchill and his prospects of going long, but, Chad's won a lot more meaningful turf stakes than I have.
Yeah, and I think in both the aforementioned the win earlier, the Vance reference, and then on Saturday in the UN, I think being tactically placed is a real advantage. I thought in those races earlier this year, Nick, he was further off the pace, and he certainly didn't fire on multiple occasions. But he's sort of similar to Farbridge. I mean, I think we've seen Farbridge really run well when he can get up and get either on or close to the early tempo and be in position to finish, and Redistricting sort of coming on in that sense. And really, that's the main rival out there, at least on the East Coast right now, for a horse like Redistricting would be Farbridge. So it will be interesting to see if he aims for be a little bit of a quick turnaround. So he might not do it. He could go to elsewhere, but the Sword Dancer would be an option.
Yeah, Chad seemed to express some discontent with the restructured Naira stake schedule that has the Sword Dancer coming back just 3 weeks after the...
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Chad's gone on record now a couple times about
crafting their stake schedule based on another racetrack.
We'll leave that one there. I don't know if I can add anything that is probably worthwhile, but moving along, as far as last week's action, gentlemen, we wanted to discuss a couple of strong performances that we saw outside of Monmouth that we've discussed so far. And I wanted to bring up the Coaching Club American Oaks, which was won by Scottish Lassie in pretty tremendous fashion, winning by 15-plus lengths, and really looking to fulfill some of the potential that she had shown as a 2-year-old. She won the Frisette, and I know that's a race that had been hadn't really held its luster as a Grade 1 over the years, but this was tremendous. I mean, she absolutely deep sixed this field, got a relatively easy lead, and just parlayed it into a huge score, adding another player to the mix in a 3-year-old filly division that, I think we can quite candidly say doesn't really have a leader right now. I guess it's still Lacara to an extent, who unfortunately...
Good cheer. You mean good cheer? Or maybe even good cheer.
It's either Lacara or good cheer, right? Lacara has 2 Grade 1s. I mean, I'm a good cheer guy, but I want to see good cheer run. I want to see how she does in the Alabama. I guess we're setting up now for a Lucara, Good Cheer, Nitrogen showdown. Scottish Lassie as well in the Alabama, and Scottish Lassie adds a lot of spice to this division with the speed that she possesses, which obviously Lucara has plenty herself. Is this an effort that was the margin, I should say, a little bit exaggerated by the soft trip, the easy lead, James, or do you think Scottish Lassie's really ready to maybe potentially even be the leader of this division by the end of the year?
Yeah, I think the soft trip and easy lead has to be taken into account. Those aren't really truly run races when horses have everything up front like she did. But the one thing about the Frizette last fall, you referenced this, she won that race by 9 lengths, but she ran, it was almost 137. She got a 92 Bristnet speed rating, and coming back and finishing a well-beaten fourth to Mercive, she ran just as fast. That Frizette last fall was slow. At least this race, she got a good number. She got a 103 Bristnet speed rating. She had to take a step forward from a speed figure perspective. I'll at least give Lucara credit for doing the same, but hers came over a sloppy track in the Alabama. One thing about Good Cheer, she just hasn't run fast races. She's all class, and her class had carried her through the Kentucky Oaks. But she's going to come this late summer, this fall. Some of these 3-year-old fillies are going to be running fast races, and she's going to have to step up her game. I think it absolutely makes her a contender, given just the lack of depth in this division. And even if you look at the Breeders' Cup distaff picture, there's at least an opportunity for these 3-year-old fillies to make at least a minor impact. Because once you get past Torpedo Anna, we saw it last weekend with the Shuby and the Molly Pitcher. You have fillies winning that haven't won, I think, randomized in 13 months, and Leslie's Rose in 15 months. They're like winless for a year. So Scottish Lassie, she's got a little bit of that same element where she has to back it up. But she's got something going for her in a sense off of this win. And her prospects are a lot more encouraging because there's not that much depth in the division.
Vance, anything to add on Scottish Lassie?
Not so much. I agree with James. I think we kind of have to take this performance with a little bit of grain of salt, given the small field, the lack of pace pressure that she encountered. The complexion of this race really changed when Lucara was forced to scratch due to unforeseen circumstances. So the Alabama is going to really tell us a whole lot about where the East Coast-based fillies in particular rank in order as far as the championship is concerned.
We'll see that Brendan Walsh filly too, Nick. Click it. Yeah. Even a filly like that has a chance to step up and make an impact in this division, I think.
No, agreed. There's got to be some new shooters just to spice this thing up. And look, I think if you're Naira, you trade a Lucara start in the Coaching Club American Oaks for Lucara and Scottish Lassie in the Alabama, where you should get both now, because if they had both run on Saturday and one performed poorly, then only one would come back. So now you'll end up getting two. And it's the same amount, but the Alabama's a bigger race with more history and more prestige. So I think it goes that way. James, what were we touching on additionally? You've got some 2-year-olds that caught your eye.
Well, first off, I'm going to mention Bookham Dano, and then I'll real quick mention the 2-year-olds. I just mentioned Bookham Dano, career best, 112 Bristnet speed rating in this Vanderbilt on Saturday. This put him at 4 for 4 at the Breeders' Cup sprint distance, but those three previous wins had come as a 2-year-old and early or last summer in the Jersey Shore, which wasn't a very strong performance in a sense. This was, I thought, masterful. He is absolutely, I think, right now, Bookham Dano peaking in a sense for Derek Ryan. Happy for a guy like Derek Ryan, who, the last good horse he trained was Musket Man, and you got to be pretty old like me to remember that horse even. So the Atlantic 6, the Bookham Dano owners, it's been a great ride for them. They're smaller time owners. It's a New Jersey bred gelding. And he travels. I know the Breeders' Cup's at Del Mar, but he's won now at 5 different tracks, and he ran huge in Saudi Arabia against Forever Young. So at least he has that in his corner. when it comes to shipping out to Del Mar this fall. As far as the 2-year-olds, I do want to mention, I mentioned last week on the Roundtable, Curtain Call, coming back off of that runner-up effort to Obliteration, who won the Sanford by 10-plus lengths and breaking his maiden by 8.5 in the slop. The third-place finisher from that June 12th maiden special weight, Clocker Special, ran Saturday at Ellis. He won by 1.5 lengths here. He was listed at 9-2 on the morning line, which I knew was a pipe dream, guys. He opened up much shorter, like closer to even money, went off 9-5, and continued to flatter this maiden special weight. His number 86 for this effort was like 10 plus points better than like several other 2-year-old maiden winners at Ellis last week. So looks like this horse could be a decent son of Not This Time for Rudolph Brissett. That was his second start. And then at Santa Anita, La Wally, Mark Glatt in a DRF Brad Free piece had touted some 2-year-olds, said he had some runners, and this was one of them. This is a 2-year-old filly by Constitution, and she is going to edge Cherry Cider, a first-time starter for Baffert that was like odds on or even money off of like a bullet work in preparation, at Santa Anita. Really, I thought a good race here to get up by the La Wally with Antonio Fresu, and she got an 88 Brissett speed rating, so that's a 2-year-old filly to pay attention to in these upcoming stakes at Del Mar.
No, very strong performance indeed. Lawali with a good late surge there. Opening weekend at Del Mar, of course, included a win in the San Clemente by Thought Process. Vance, where were you going to discuss in terms of what we have left?
Yeah, I was going to bring up Thought Process. She's kind of the nitrogen of 3-year-old turf fillies out in California. She's basically dominated that division, and her only poor race out in California was actually the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf last fall, where she just set a ridiculously fast pace, and she was facing a world-class group in there, and she weakened to 9th, beating about 6 lengths. But otherwise, this filly, she's not a need the lead type, as we kind of saw in this race on Saturday, and she won very comfortably. It wasn't asked too much in the stretch, and one for fun. And so trainer Phil D'Amatos obviously got the Del Mar Oaks, a grade 1 race, circled later this meet, but we'll see what happens after that. I wonder if he'll ship her to Keeneland for the Queen Elizabeth II Challenge Cup. That would be an obvious race. And of course, the American Oaks in late December at Santa Anita in her own backyard. And I would be very fascinated to see. It depends on how Nitrogen herself does in the Alabama. But if she doesn't run well on fast dirt, she's going to return to the grass at some point. And seeing Thought Process and Nitrogen having another showdown.
I think Vance froze on us.
Possibly at Keeneland and possibly at Santa Anita and the American Oaks. I would love to see a rematch between these two, because I don't think both of them were at the top of their games in the Breeders' Cup last fall.
Yeah, I agree with that. I thought this was a good effort. She did it was a pretty soft pace. She had a soft trip, but all in all, I thought ran well, capitalized on it. And I'm hesitant to go overboard criticizing horses that run on turf with speed, because more often than not, they're going to find, obviously speed kills on any surface, but on turf, they're going to find their way into softer trips probably more often than not. And so I think it's a little too critical to say, she had a soft trip because she's got some speed. They just didn't go very quickly. The leader went out and grabbed the lead and really threw out the anchor. And I think that invited Thought Process and everybody else into the race. But it was a good effort, and she's obviously a filly with a lot of talent. I forget, Vance, that the California-based horses ran better in last year's Breeders' Cup than I really remembered, at least on the weekend. Ironman Cal came back in the Oceanside last week and underperformed just a little bit, but he's working his way back into form. And I got a feeling one of these years, maybe this year with it being out in Southern California, that one of these Golden State-based horses is going to make some noise in one of the Breeders' Cup races. Am I off my rocker?
No, absolutely not. And it's always nice to have a home court advantage. And and as far as grass horses are concerned, California is not what it once was across all the age groups. But I think they did overperform last fall at Del Mar. It's back on their home court again. And I would expect several of them, as you said, to step up and run very well.
Yeah, I mean, even at the very least right now, we could be looking at a California-based favorite in the turf sprint with Motorius if he continues on headed towards the fall. James, I think it was you that was actually looking to check out there for a minute, but we've got you back in the fold as we close out our conversation on thought process. What did you think of her effort in the San Clemente and some ideas on maybe horses that could contest the Del Mar Oaks?
Yeah, I thought she was huge, and I mean, Hector Barrios had a huge weekend on this opening weekend, I thought, too. I mean, he won races on the main track. He had a pair of turf stakes wins. I do think it's a fascinating discussion, given how good nitrogen is on the East Coast. The thought process is now on the West Coast. And we'll see how nitrogen. I know Vance probably talked about nitrogen in Alabama, but there is a potential for them to hook up this fall if nitrogen doesn't run well.
No, that would be great. I wanted to discuss a turf sprinter who's a horse that I've grown a lot of affinity for. Future Is Now, who won the Caress at Saratoga on Saturday. Paco Lopez came up for his two big mounts on Haskell Day at Saratoga and won on both of them, including Bookham Dano, who James discussed, and Future Is Now. And she's the filly in the black cap, two off the inside here. Just a really game, hard-trying horse that's developed so nicely for Mike Trombetta over the course of the last 18 months or so. This was yet another Saratoga graded stake win for her, and she held off Zeitlos and everybody else that are running at her late. You know, it's a turf sprint, so the margin is a bit deceptive. I thought she was a much easier winner than that margin would indicate. And, I wonder, guys, if at 5 furlongs on the turf, we saw how well a horse like AG Bullet ran last year in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility the Future Is Now is a legitimate Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint contender. What do you think about that, Vance?
I don't know. I think the turf female sprint schedule on the East Coast and Kentucky is it's pretty solid. It's pretty lucrative. I suppose you'd have to wait and see how she performs, and I think they might have another grass sprint for her at Saratoga, and then she's going to go to Keeneland. I think their race is the Franklin Stakes.
Right.
Yeah, I would reevaluate after the Franklin Stakes because that's a race I know she would target. But as far as being able to beat males in this division and possibly facing some crack European sprinters, I'm not so sure. But she's a gem of consistency, as you said, and she's a joy to watch and very successful for her connections. And it's very nice for a horse like her to have such a well-developed stake schedule, both in Kentucky and on the East Coast, that she can exploit.
Anything else, James?
Yeah, I think she could be a contender. It's all going to be determined by how she's coming out of the race in the fall. But, yeah, both her and AG North, I mean, fillies and mares, they can hold their own in the turf sprint. So I'm not worried about her gender at all. She's really, I mean, look at her record. I think, she, other than that loss, I mean, now she's won, I think, 3 of her last 4 starts, all like graded stakes.
Yeah, she's super consistent, no doubt about it. In fact, maybe the best female turf sprinter in the country is Queen Maxima, who lost the Ozanitas on Sunday, trying to go long at Del Mar and didn't really get the best of rides, in my opinion, being taken off the pace. But that's neither here nor there. She'll return to what she does best at some point in the future. What these guys do best is recap, and that's what we just did on this edition of the Racing Roundtable. Before we go, wanted to touch on a really fun new development taking place with regards to Twinspires tournaments. Beginning tomorrow on Wednesday, Saratoga is in the mix for the Twinspires tournaments. A couple of events to highlight. There is a Saratoga feeder, a $200 one, to the July 28th Ellis Park Mint Million Betting Challenge qualifier. Also circle on your calendar Saturday, August 2nd, a Whitney $800 Whitney Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge KDBC qualifier. It might be an NHC and KDBC qualifier. Either way, there's KDBC seats available, but most importantly, Saratoga action in the Twinspires tournament space. We love the participation that we've been getting there, and that is obviously a growing segment of hungry horse players, which we all love to fraternize with for sure. So that's going to do it for this edition of the Racing Roundtable. Be sure to check out those Twinspires tournaments featuring Saratoga starting tomorrow. These guys will be back next week to recap, and some of us will be here on Thursday for the Twinspires jury. For James and Vance, until then, Nick here, best of luck.